Welcome everybody. This is a special committee of the whole meeting for the municipality of the County of Annapolis. We'll start with the roll call. District 1.
Bruce Proud.
District 2.
Brian Woodsall.
District 3. Alan Parrish. District 4.
Claude Burger.
District 5.
Lynn Muller.
District 6.
Alec Morrison.
District 7.
David Hudson.
District 8.
Michael Gunn.
District 9.
Wendy Sheridan.
District 10.
Brad Redden.
And District 11.
Diana Bell.
Thank you. I don't think anybody has disclosure of interest to make. Unless they do, make it now. Seeing none, we'll move ahead to the approval of the agenda. You have it before you. It was handed out, I believe,
Does anyone need one?
we have extra copies.
I never checked my mailbox.
We're going that way.
There's only one thing, isn't Yes, please.
I'll take one.
Right there.
Thank you.
Chair was a dinosaur.
You there? I have one.
The young one. The young one. Do you want both carry young? What you said, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the rest of us.
Thank you. The agenda has been circulated and the deputy warden has moved to approve the agenda as circulated. Is there a second for that? Councilor Prout seconds. Discussion on the order of the day. Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion's carried. So the next item on the agenda is to go in camera in accordance with Section 22(2)(c) of the Municipal Government Act, which relates to personnel. Would someone move to go in camera? Deputy Warden moves, seconded by Councilor Longmire. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. This is the resumption of the Special Committee of the whole meeting for the municipality of the County of Annapolis. The next item on the agenda is new business, and we have a presentation from King's Transit Authority. With us today is the General Manager of the King's Transit Authority, Michael Getchell, and also the Executive Director for the Interim IMSA Pilot Project, Dwight Wynot. So I think they're going to be making a joint presentation, and then we'll have a series of questions. And I believe most of the material we're going to see today will have two focuses. One is simply any questions that any of us have with respect to King's Transit. And secondly, any questions with respect to the electrification grant that we discussed previously around this council. So whoever's going to begin, please proceed.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here finally to actually present to you and kind of go over what King's Transit is looking at for the ISIP program. I'm Mike Getchell. I'm the General Manager. I'm just over a year with you folks now. Started on October 10th of 2021. I derived from the Toronto Transit Commission, where I ran the Transit Control Center at the end. And I've worked through the electrification process with the TTC, so I am familiar with electrification, what the ISIP means, and how we're progressing through the program. I'm not going to say I'm a complete expert, but I will tell you I've been immersed in this for the last year, and with the province and federal government, and getting their feedback, so I understand where we are, and hopefully where we're going to be by the end of 2026. So let me get started right here. So ISIP is investing in Canadian infrastructure program. So it had a total of 11. Now that didn't come out quite right, but that's okay. $11,946,830 for us. specifically for King's Transit. Overall, in the entire funding structure, there was over $15 billion across Canada, with $6 billion of that going into a transit stream, specifically for public transit. No other stream in that fund applies to public transit, and we could not apply to any other stream in that fund. So after our 1% ridership allotment, so in 2018, they took all ridership from across Canada, they broke it into the provincial allotments, and then the province broke it into the allotments for each transit agency. So in Nova Scotia, we qualified for 1% of the total revenue that was here. Cape Breton, 1.42%. The rest of it went to Halifax Region Transit, which equaled almost $690 million. So that's where our ridership falls in with everybody else. So our total funds, like I said, $11,946,830. Phase 1, there's 2 phases in this project. Phase 1, which is a study to electrify King's Transit, and then a phase 2, which is an implementation to electrify King's Transit. So that 11.946 is the complete amount for phase 1 and phase 2 that we've been allotted. We are taking $250,000 of that to do a transit feasibility study and a holistic transit study. So there is a difference there. The feasibility study is going to look completely at our area, what we service, our routes right now, and determine what the best, most feasible way to provide transit for our communities is moving forward into the next 5 to 7 years. With the ISIP program, we have to procure the assets, maintain the assets, and run the assets for no less than 5 years. And then after that, we can apply for a new fund to renew those assets. But we have to keep, procure, and maintain all the assets through this program for no less than 5 years. The spirit of the program is to keep it until end of life. So phase 1 is December 22 to September 23. This should have been done already. I'm not going to lie to you. We should be at the end of phase 1 in September of this year. We should have been at the end of phase 1. We should have been putting RFPs out this month to purchase vehicles, infrastructure, construction, whatever it is. We're not there. I want to go over a little bit why we're not there, first of all. So 2021, in January, when the fund came out, Municipality of the County of Kings applied for the fund, not under the transit stream. They applied to electrify their fleet. At the end of that application, King's Transit was added on. When I arrived at the end of 2021, and in discussions with the province, I was advised that that's a no-go, it's not going to fly, we're not going to be able to get funded because we're ineligible under that stream of funding. So at that point, already a year behind. And now I'm having to redo both applications. Okay? The phase 1 study, not as difficult to put together, although it still took 6.5 months back and forth with the province to determine that that application is going to get through. It was finally submitted in August of 2022. That's the phase 1. Phase 1 has yet to be approved, but is going to be, or should be approved as of November 30th, basically the end of this month, or at the end of next month. Good sign for us. Bad part of that is anything to do with phase 2, phase 1, so studies, climate lens, all that stuff, nothing can be completed until we get that approval November 30th. Any financial incurments that we suffer because of phase 1 are not, we're not able to retrieve that back from the government. Okay, so phase 1 is at a stall until that November 30th deadline when we get a written approval from the provincial government. Once we have that written approval, then we can put out our RFPs and we can start our GHG mitigation studies. We can start, we've already done that. That is the one portion I should note that we were allowed to get reimbursed on afterwards because it takes a little longer sometimes and all that. So they were able to approve that one portion. We've got that completed already. The phase 2 of the study is the implementation of electrifying of King's Transit. One, I think the province did us a disservice by naming those applications as they did. They came back with a name on them. So phase 1, study of electrifying King's Transit, and phase 2, implementation of electrifying King's Transit. This fund is not specifically for electrification, it's to move into zero emission. Okay, so that's completely different because there's 4 or 5 different types of zero emission vehicles that we can move into now. And it also includes hybrid vehicles because it reduces our GHG emissions. So almost by 30% with a hybrid vehicle. Okay, so the feasibility study, this is what we're looking at. So KTA suggested routes. So over the last 9 months, I've been on a GTS file, and I have been KML file, and I've been pinpointing routes and everything that we really need to service. So critical infrastructure, communities that are not serviced right now, to make sure that we provide an equitable service and a timely service. Right now, you know, your headways are 2 hours, bus every 2 hours. That's not sufficient for anybody's area, right? Especially in a rural area where you could be waiting outside, waiting for a vehicle, snow, ice, storms. I'm not happy about it. A little embarrassed by the service levels, to be honest with you, because I answer to the community about this stuff, and it is a bit embarrassing that we haven't been able to improve those schedules and improve the service for our communities. But this is why we're into this ISIC program, is so we can do that. So locations and assessments. So that will be our new minus facility, our leased facility in Weymouth, and the Bridgetown Yard. They'll also be looking at those are adequate places to be housing buses, parking buses, what it's going to cost us over the term of the lifespan of these vehicles to have them there, as well as the proposed routes that King's Transit has put together. Is that feasible moving into the future? Are we going to be able to maintain the service that we want to maintain? Right? So we're trying to both service up to at least 45-minute headways. So every 45 minutes there's a bus instead of every 2 hours. And we're looking to interline some of those smaller routes. So create smaller routes that will interline and go through the smaller communities and then attach to the longer route that goes all the way up and down. So it's kind of like a fishbone. Call it that. So you get the spine and you get all the parts off the fishbone or off the spine. That's exactly what we're trying to do here. I didn't like that very much, did it? Okay. So the feasibility study is also going to provide a cost to modernize the system. So what it looks like if we want to maintain those routes, everything that we have now, the amount of vehicles that we have, what is it going to cost to modernize the system? I'm going to have a few more generic numbers in here for you that are estimates at this time, as with everything else right now, because phase 1 has not been completed. So everything we're giving you is a reasonable expectation of what to expect, given my experience, coordination with industry leaders, and other research that I've performed. So, and it will provide the most feasible recommendation. After my conference this week, I have found that a lot of rural agencies are moving into on-demand and microtransit strategies, and they're being pushed away from fixed route. So a bus every 2 hours along this route doesn't exist a lot in rural communities anymore. Then our transit study. So this is more of a holistic overview. So this is going to look at the communities that we serve, communities that are underserved, critical infrastructure that needs to be served, the frequency, basic lifestyle of those around the communities and corporations that we serve to make sure that their employees can get to work, to provide commerce or help with commerce. And also the holistic overview of it's not just greening our fleet and bringing our GHG emissions down. Now it's that one bus can take 40 vehicles, single passenger vehicles, off the road. That is where our contribution to the GHG reduction comes into play. Transit really only submits about 1% to 2% of all GHG emissions in Canada. That's all public transit agencies. That tells you that 98% is from somewhere else. And I would suggest that a lot of that is from single-use private vehicles. The more we can take off the road by providing an equitable, frequent, reliable service, the bigger that number is going to become for us. So it looks at the holistic outlook, like I just explained, microtransit and on-demand strategies, which is big right now, and also in this ISIP funding, the federal government has caveat in there stating that we must look at those options because they understand fixed route is really expensive, it's demanding on the vehicles, and there are better ways to provide transportation for your citizens. Microtransit and on-demand, not necessarily my cup of tea, but I do see the benefit to them. So they're going to provide information on connections as well. How far should we go? Where should we connect? If should run down to Yarmouth? If we should run into HRM, what those connections should look like. Okay, and ensuring connections to vital infrastructure and when people require transit. We got 3 Indigenous communities in our service area. We do not service one. That's not equitable. Right? Those are the things that this holistic outlook or this holistic study is going to take into account and provide feedback on. Some of these are going to scare you, and this is kind of why I want to let you know why ISIP, yes, $12 million feels like a lot of money, right? It does. But I want you to look at these numbers, and then I'm going to explain them a little bit. So here, we've got our fully electric 40-foot transit bus. Right now, retailing $1.3 million. It is a 2-to-1 replacement for a diesel bus, meaning if you're going to replace a diesel bus, you have to replace it with 2 electric buses because the distance and the kilometers are not there on the bus. The infrastructure besides that, we'll get into the infrastructure costs here in a second, but these are the considerations I took into play when deciding if electrification is going to work, where it's going to work, and what that looks like, okay? So, we're looking at this. If right now we have 12 buses in service, 8 of them at their end of their useful life. That means 1 million. Zero emission bus. Okay. They're at their end or use of end of life, or end of useful life. There we go. So basically, that means they're in need of replacement immediately. Right, so that's 8 buses. At a 2-to-1 replacement at $1.3 million, that's almost $21 million to replace all 8 buses for electric vehicles. That is without the infrastructure to support the electrification.
When you say 8 buses, does that include Annapolis's buses?
So that includes all buses that need to be replaced. So yes, there are buses in Annapolis and Digby that need to be replaced as well. They're at their end of their useful life. So you're looking at, there would be at least one in Annapolis and at least one in Digby. So you're looking at $1.3 million just to replace that one bus, but you need 2 if you're going to run your route. And I venture to say, with a route as long as Annapolis, one of your buses from Bridgetown to Greenwood travels 757 kilometers a day. You'll need 3 or 4 of these buses. And if you don't need 3 or 4, you're going to need the charging infrastructure that's going to allow them to charge on the street. I'm going to show you that number here in a second too.
So are those the same size buses that you have on the street now?
So that's the 40-foot bus, yeah. So that's a normal transit bus.
So why couldn't you shrink it down if the ridership is low?
Because a lot of the bus manufacturers are not making the smaller, like if you go to Nova or New Flyer, 35 and 40-foot buses, that's it. I'm looking at some prototype buses right now that are being developed here in Canada. Over the last 6 years they've been developed. Seems like it's going to be a good fit. They have not produced one bus to go into service yet. Meaning, we're not going to invest in that because we can't afford $1 million mistake. So if the bus doesn't work, we're done. I can't afford to go out and buy another bus.
So what about the hybrids? Do you have the smaller buses for the hybrid?
Yep, there are smaller buses for the hybrids. There's the 15 passengers, which we were looking at, but there's also the 30, 32, 35. Okay, there's also 40-foot buses as well.
Mike, could I?
Of course, Al.
I went online and looked up small electric buses, and they're up there.
So, funny enough, I saw a few of them at the CUDA conference this week in Montreal. So there's one that's being utilized, not being utilized, it's being procured through the process and will be in service, I believe, by the end of this year in St. John, New Brunswick. It's called the Carzan. It's an E-Jest is what it's called. It's from Europe. Made by BMW Motors. 292 kilometers, full charge. That's on a good day. Seats 15 passengers. After looking at it, wouldn't suggest or recommend that we move forward with a bus that's only got tires this big in the climate that we live in. It will not maneuver.
Well, these were made in the US, the ones I saw.
Do you remember what the name of it
Well,
was?
I just went online and put in small electric buses. And
Yeah.
I just
So Crestline has it. BYD and Proterra is developing a 15-passenger, the Crestline buses. I looked at those today. One, they don't have a lot of hybrids. And they certainly said that when it comes to electric, they're not there yet. I've got Nova Bus recommending that we do not move to electric. So if I have a bus manufacturer telling me that bus is $1.3 million, but they're recommending we buy something that's $500,000 cheaper, that tells me something, right? As for equipment that you may see, we have to make sure, one, that it's not a prototype. It's been around and it's been tested. Like I said, King's Transit cannot be the testing ground for new vehicles. It just can't. We don't have the capacity for that. We don't have the mechanical staff. We don't have the electrical engineers on staff that are going to need to look at these electrical buses. It's a complete revamp of our processes, right, to do that, and it may not be feasible. So this is why I want to go over these numbers with you folks, just so you can see the differences between the bus costs, what the replacement costs are going to be for us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if we downgraded and said, okay, let's only replace 4 regular buses instead of the 8, still, we need 2 to 1. That's $10.4 million. That is the chunk of the ISIT program. We will not get approved for that because there's no funding for charging, there's no funding for infrastructure, there's no funding for the software that we're going to require, and anything over that 11.946 is at really everyone's paying for it. There's no compensation for that, and it's billed back to the partners. So we don't. It's very important for us to stay on budget in this project. We have built in a very large contingency to make sure that we don't go over. Chargers went from 100,000 to $250,000 in almost a year. Right? So this 1.3, when we go to purchase this bus in 2026, not going to be 1.3 anymore. It's going to be more, right? So these are the things this is why I built a 38% contingency into that 11.9. So really, we got just over $7 million to spend with that contingency in place to make sure we don't go over budget. So hydrogen fuel cell is the next most expensive. This is not going to work for our area, and it's because we don't have hydrogen. So we need a facility that produces hydrogen that's close to us, so we don't have to ship it in. We don't want to be Michelin shipping in 50 trucks of natural gas or whatever they use, costing us, $1 million for fuel a year. Like, that's just not going to be acceptable. Plus, we're not there yet. Hydrogen just isn't there. Again, experimental. We're not sure how it's going to run. It's a 1-to-1 replacement, they're saying. So, one hydrogen bus for a regular bus. We're just not there. Compressed natural gas. So a bit cheaper, but still you're looking at, if you want to replace all 8, you're looking at almost 13 million. If you want to replace 4, we're looking at 6.4 million. So that's a little more reasonable and an area that we could explore if that's the way we want to go with zero emission, but we're waiting to hear what the feasibility study and the holistic transit outlook tells us first. And then we got the hybrid electric 40-foot buses. So they told me about 840 is what they're going to cost, 840,000. I put 900 in there just so we are above that, right? In case something goes wrong. We replace 8, we're at 7.2 million. We replace 4, we're at 3.6 million. If we look at those numbers, that'll probably be the next slide. So if we looked at those numbers, you're still looking at a $4.7 million leeway there for infrastructure, the building or buildings that you would be putting up to house this infrastructure. And it would really support the system for the next 10 to 12 years because those buses are 10 to 12 year buses. I know the Toronto Transit Commission has one running now. It's been running for 18 years and they're going to keep it running because that hybrid bus won't die for some reason. So,
Mike, there's a question here, and I think if any of you have any questions, you should feel free to. Chris, you can't interrupt. Mike.
I was gonna wait for the.
Yeah.
We'll keep going.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have a second? Okay. Okay, so then we look at our chargers. So slow charge. Slow charge, they say slow charge, about 3 or 4 hours, 2 to 3 hours to charge the bus, up to about 80%. We would not want 80% in our area. We would want to go to 100% because of the distance we travel. So we are looking probably 3 to 4 hour charge time. One of those apparatuses can have 3 diverters come off it. So that means 3 buses can be hooked up to that apparatus, but only one at a time gets charged. So consecutive. That would mean that we need, if we're buying 8 new buses to charge, we need 3 of those. All right, so that's $750,000 right there just for the slow charge. If we want to electrify Annapolis and Digby, we need the inverted chargers. So the ones that sit on the side of the road where the bus will pull up, it will drop down a pantograph and it will charge it for 6 minutes and it will give them an hour and a half of juice. You don't want to do that all the time to the batteries. It wears the batteries down. Those are $1 million a piece. 4 of them to support the infrastructure and the network is $4 million. Chargers for smaller vehicles. So whether it be a supervisory vehicle or the smaller 15 passengers, you're looking at about 15,000, and I've heard they're going to be more, but about 15,000. So you're looking at $120,000 there. We're looking at almost $5 million just for charging infrastructure. So we got fully electric vehicles at 20.8. If you really want to electrify the whole fleet, you got charging infrastructure at 4.8. Your total cost is $25,670,000. And our potential cost overrun that the partners would be on the hook for is just under $14 million. That's if you want to electrify the entire fleet and our entire routing. That's probably just a little low. Okay. So we look at hybrid electric buses, $7.2 million to replace all 8. Charging infrastructure, because we don't need charging infrastructure for the hybrid electric buses. They charge themselves off the motor that's in there. Total cost, $7.2. Remaining funds for further projects, $4.3 million. That means infrastructure where we need to house the buses. $1 million facility here, $500 facility here, $2 million facility for the maintenance facility in New Montes. However that gets broken down. But like I said, guys, these are just rough numbers. I want to give you the idea of what we went through to try and figure out what the balance of this is going to be. So those are the basic calculations. Estimates aren't set in stone and still need to be reviewed to the ISIP study phase 1. We are committed in the phase 2 to maintain the outcomes of the phase 1 study. So the report that you received from me with my name on it, suggesting the route that we take for transit in this area, are recommendations based on my experience and research. I cannot move forward with the province and spend any money unless this phase 1 is done and it is more or less in line with what we're trying to do. If they tell us that electrification is not going to work, it's not going to work. And if I go ahead and make that move and spend the money on electrification, we are now on the hook for every penny that comes out of it without financial help from the province of defense. Open discussion. I know we have questions. So hit me.
Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
So, first off, can you just tell us a little bit about hybrid buses and how they work? Is that like straight diesel electric drivetrain, like a train?
Pretty much.
With energy recovery, or?
Pretty much, yeah. So it does have an electric motor. The new ones are having electric motors. They have 5,000 kilograms of batteries on the top of them or something like that. And the motor that's in there is no longer a great big Cummins diesel. It's a smaller truck motor that's still diesel, uses at least 30% less fuel, but that is what charges your batteries. Alright, so it will run when it needs to charge. The batteries will get charged, the engine will shut down. When the battery power reaches 20% or less, motor kicks back on, charges the batteries, keeps you moving. Couple things. If you don't run out of fuel, you don't run out of power. right? So you don't have to worry about those long distances. You don't have, I think they're calling it range anxiety now. So you got an electric car, you're not going to be able to make 300 kilometers and you start to sweat about it in your car. Yeah, I don't want my drivers doing that, right? Worried about if they're going to get stuck on a road with no heat or air conditioning or whatever. So we have to make sure that their safety is at forefront as well. So those hybrid buses, really self-sufficient.
And then how do natural gas buses end up being low emission? Because natural gas has less energy per unit of carbon than diesel does.
So I'm not the engineer.
Okay.
I'm going to throw that right out there now. Yeah, the GHG emissions reduction climate lens indicates that CNG is less emissions than diesels. Okay, so how they come to that conclusion and the formulas they use, I don't know, to be honest with you.
I just know from the chemistry end of things, I don't know how to
I'm certainly not chemist either, yeah. So tell you how to move a bus, but molecules not so much.
Yeah, Councillor Hudson, go ahead.
Yes, just on the hybrid buses. During the different seasons, those percentages that you mentioned a few minutes ago, do those change? They do, so they become less efficient?
So it depends what technology we're talking about here. So anything in inclement weather, so very hot, very cold, it's going to affect how that product works. Batteries, as we all know, like I've got a hybrid car. I went out yesterday when it was 1 degree and I lost 30% of my battery, right? So I didn't even make it halfway to work before I was on fuel again. That will happen with electric vehicles as well. So now, like the estimate that we got from NSCC COGS, because they did a study for us, was it could be up to, they gave us a reasonable number, I guess, but they said up to about a 40% battery loss, which means 40% of your kilometers are gone as well. I'm reading it can be upwards of 70%. So if we put a contingency in of 70%, our buses would not even make one trip in Annapolis before they have to be recharged. So if we do 7 trips a day, and they're making half a trip, then we need 14 buses in Annapolis to provide service as we would have stated, right? It all boils down to these numbers, and that's why I suggested 15 passenger smaller vehicles, because I know feasibility is a big thing for everybody. 40-foot bus is not cheap. Every time you fill it up, it's $700. We fill it up once a day, if not more. Right? So, and we got a good deal on fuel. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Quite a few comments here. I guess the biggest one is we need smaller buses in Annapolis County. We need more trips, more routes.
Agreed.
You know, Bear River, part of my district, has no service at all. We need smaller buses. We need more trips. And with this, I do query our idea of going to electric, because even the hybrids, because they cost so much to not just build, to obtain. And when it comes to service them, you need very specialized gear. So why aren't we just thinking a smaller 17, 18 passenger bus with a diesel engine in it and go with that? Does the funding not cover that?
So anything full diesel is not covered by the government anymore, and moving forward it will not be. So what they're forcing us to do is move to zero emission, because they want to keep their climate goals for 2050. So we're having to match that, right? They're forcing us to do this. They're also forcing us to look at those microtransit strategies, right? And those smaller routes. Like, I thought I had it right here, so I brought this up. Sorry. I've been developing some routes, actually. And most of them are those smaller routes. Sorry, I had you guys out of there because I was pinning some out, but And you don't see right there, but there are routes going into, I've got them going in from, Digby Ferry into Bear River and servicing that community. I have them going into Greenwood to Middleton, into Lawrencetown and Nicktow. Annapolis Royal with its own connection to Cornwallis Park, so they can get back and forth that way. With a route that goes all the way up to Greenwood from Clements Park. So you're not going to see it all right here because it's still in the works, guys. I didn't really want to show this because we're still in the works, but all those white lines. There was one from Digby into Bear River. I'm sure I have it down there, but then you've got Bridgetown, Greenwood, Annapolis Royal. So there are those connections, and those connections are not meant to be big 40-foot buses because it's just not going to work, right?
So that's the unfortunate part of this whole program is, phase one's not finished, but the government shortened the time frame here. So we had to have phase two application. We have to have it on the 15th of November. So that's the big, change of this whole thing. Normally we would finish the phase one, obviously, and then come to you guys, have the conversation around what the options are and recommendations are, and then you go ahead and do this. But because of the timing change that was dictated to us, that's the reason for the phase two. The original meeting that we had at the board level, that the warden was looking for the commitment on, the TBRs and the funding piece. We really need to get this phase one completed. And Michael's ran dozens of different scenarios to provide to the consulting group when they come in to come back with what recommendations, service levels, service intervals, routes, and obviously the equipment at the end of the day. So, that's a great question. The ISIP program was forcing us to go hybrid as a minimum because they will not support the gas or diesel. So, that's where we're at. So, we're throwing as much, together as we can. So when the different groups come in from, consultants on phase one, you have lots of options to review and recommend.
Councilor Longmire?
Thank you. Thanks for this presentation. Lots to think about for sure, and it's certainly exciting to look towards the future and being more efficient. I guess my concern actually probably is for Michael and Dwight and the whole organization of King's Transit. We're with Annapolis County, we're working without a contract. Is that not true?
It is.
Yeah. So I find phase one, phase two, through phase whatever really challenging. Because I don't know what that contract's going to look like. Therefore, ridership and who owns the ridership. And there's so many questions, right?
I'll let him speak to that for a second, but I'll get into who owns ridership and assets and everything here in a minute, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so, that's one of the things that I guess I'm in the room for now is, the current IMSA that even the core partners belong to was written in 1990. Looking at the 1999, I think was the date.
Yeah.
So it's ancient. It's unfair. It's ancient, but they've been operating that. Obviously, yourselves and Digby, your service partners. Again, the document that I think the one that we're working on today was a 2012 document. It hasn't been touched since. So. Take it phase one finished first. Let's see what those recommendations are as to what those service areas should be, what service levels are supposed to be, and then I'm going to sit down and try to come up with some options for the collective group when it comes down to full partnership, how those partnerships are going to work, what fees are going to be, and how those fees are going to be allocated across the board. So it's we're unfortunately being pushed by this phase two requirement, but we figured phase one complete. And then we'll know what those expectations are. We will work through those numbers and again, hopefully come up with multiple options that we can all sit down and discuss and banter back and forth because I'm not expecting the first one's going to be the right one by any means. and move forward from that.
Councillor Prout?
Thank you. Mine's a question of route. Looking here, Kingston Greenwood, I'm assuming you're adding from Kingston down to Frenchies and Wilmot. Is that correct?
I'm gonna go ahead and say yes to that.
It doesn't exist at the present time. You come into the Greenwood Mall, go down Bridge Street, swing down the 201 and
Oh yeah, that's got
out to Frenchies. I have a total of less than a half a kilometer of King's Transit in District 1. I point that out from a very parochial point of view. So
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem is that, King's Transit is not an equitable service right now, or an inclusive service right now, and I'll be the first one to admit to that. We don't service the places we need to service. Even if it's just a perception of some cases where we should be servicing, if it has vulnerable individuals and constituents, King's Transit should be there to provide that public service that they pay into, right? Like, I'm not gonna say it, but that's where micro-transit and on-demand strategies come into play. Mm-hmm. But then you're looking at software to support that. $700,000, I priced it out, right? That software will allow us to track every single vehicle, tell me where people get on the buses and where people get off the buses, so we have data to formulate new routes. But it will also allow the smaller vehicles and any contracted services that we may need later on to use this software to integrate with our service so we can provide a better service to the entire community. So if we're not servicing that one specific area, at least we'll have a blocked off geofence that one on-demand transit vehicle is just waiting for that pickup. They're connecting to our buses and then they're driving them to their door. It's called first K, last K. So from transit to the door, from the door to transit. Right? That's how we're going to provide a better service for everyone in District.
Councillor Connell?
Well, I have quite a list, but
Go ahead, hit me.
you keep saying we're partners, and we're not. We're fee for service. That's the difference.
So what would you like me to call you?
Fee for service. We're not a partner. We've never joined.
So you're a contracted partner.
So I got
A contracted service.
through the interim IMSA, correct me if I'm wrong, you're a partner. You have agreed to participate.
No, we're not, because there are those provisions, for example, that I can't vote on things that deal with financial stuff.
Just for KTA, but not in the IMSA.
Well,
Right?
We did not join.
My understanding is when
if you want to call us a partner, we're certainly not a full partner.
not in KTA.
Correct, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, but the IMSA you are.
Well, we're a partner in the IMSA, but we're here today talking about King's Transit.
Okay, I respect it. So, I mean,
We've never been a partner with King Transit.
no, there's been a service partner agreement in place ever since.
Right. We pay fee for service.
Yes, sir.
We've always chose which buses that we feel suitable for our own district. And our buses,
Correct?
we bought them without any government subsidy.
Correct.
We bought our own buses.
Yeah.
Citizens paid for those buses. We also have a TCTS company that works within our county that goes and you say first kilometer, second kilometer, or whatever. To me, that's what TCS does for us.
Okay.
So, as I said here, I don't want to cut them out. So, new programs that you guys see that may work may not be what this county wants. We tried routes, we tried in all the years of this transit coming through our county, we've changed the routes around and got very little pickup. So that's why the designated routes went back and are been pretty well dedicated to what we've serviced. We know our county best. We know our citizens best. I don't disagree with some of the councilors saying that we don't have transit out to some areas, but we're going to pay for that. If a bus runs from Cornwallis to Bear River and we see that it's only picking up a handful of individuals. And we talk to TCTS and they say, no, we can do that. Then why should the citizens be paying for 2 programs? That's one of my questions. I'd like to know who owns the ridership, because there are ridership, because there are buses. I see you shaking your head, but I'm just saying, from our point.
So I don't want to get too far before I start, because I'm going to forget. I'm going to forget to answer questions, right? So, so the first question was
The TTC, the smaller.
Oh yeah. So we're not looking to take any of those guys over. I have discussions with Dial Ride down in Windsor. We're looking to expand into Windsor and Halifax region. I've had conversations with Dial Ride. They're very supportive of this and being that connection, because they believe their ridership will increase by doing this as well. Kings Point to Point, we are in discussions with them on what that looks like right now. In no way, shape, or form do I want to run those smaller agencies or integrate them into us. That's not what I'm looking for. They have a private business. We are not a private business. But there should be some cooperation there to make sure that our constituents, or your constituents, and my customers have the service that they need to get to places. Right?
So, Councillor Con, your example is exactly what we want to do.
Yeah.
We want them to go to Bear River to pick up the 3 people. That makes the most sense. Bring them back to a drop-off point where then they can get on the. And we'll use KTA because I don't want to use King's Transit, because obviously that's not the right name if we're going to continue. But, and then they would get to point A or B from that location. This hub and spoke type concept, or the fishbone concept, whichever, analogy we want to use to describe it, but it's to reach out further to bring people back to run. Again, if we're going to run on the one east-west, that's the key.
To cooperate and have the main transit route, and then those smaller, less kilometer transactions with the smaller companies, instead of running, like if they could drop somebody off at the transit system, we get them down to Halifax, that car will stay in your area for the remainder of the day to service more of your constituents. So that's what we're trying to do, is work better together with these individual companies to make sure that we can provide a better service to everybody. Not are we looking to take anybody over. I don't know their business, I don't pretend to, and I don't want to run their business. So.
Councillor Collins, more questions?
There was ridership.
From an ISIP perspective, the ridership is KTA's ridership.
Well, I'd like to challenge that. I'd like for us council to send them a letter and ask them.
Okay, that's your choice.
That's your choice.
That's your prerogative, and I have contacts.
Because we pay fee for service.
Yeah.
We are not a partner of King's Transit.
So in discussions with the province and the federal government, what has been put forth to us and what's in the ISIP application is that all assets procured from this ISIP is sole ownership of King's Transit and operators. So we are not allowed to relinquish control of those assets. We're not allowed to give them away. We're not allowed to say, okay, it's your bus now, deal with it, because then we don't get any more funding. We are committed to having these under us, and it's because we are the transit agency or authority in this area. No disrespect at all, but Annapolis County had no official public transit agency under their name when ISIP in 2018 came out, and that's what they used as ridership, is the transit agencies in Canada. If you didn't have a public transit agency, you do not qualify, you're ineligible for the ISIP program. There are funds that you are eligible for if you'd like to start something like that. There's the Rural Transit Solution Fund, is that your ETF fund? There are funds for municipalities and organizations to apply for if they'd like that sort of thing. ISIP is not one of them.
So there are different programs, and that's what I'm saying. Sitting here as a councillor, I'm not willing to spend 10 cents unless we own the buses.
Okay, so unfortunately, in the ISIP program, that can't happen. And it won't happen for the life cycle of the vehicle either. So if that is going to be a problem, then it's not something that we're going to be able to work through on that matter, because it's not us putting those guidelines down, it's the federal and the provincial government. They're also the ones that told me I had until March 2023 to finish the phase 2 application and then bumped it up by 6 months, meaning I had to do 8 months of work or 6 months of work in 1.5. So I understand the frustration, but we have guidelines that we have to follow too, and this is one that what's been put forth to us. So I'd love to be able to say, hey, listen, there's 2 buses for you. But I can't.
No, and that's where we have to make a decision if we want to go through another program and make sure that we own the residents that put the money in, because transit's not dictated to us. Mm-hmm. We can do transit, or we have the choice of not doing transit.
Yeah.
As a county.
Of course.
So if $1 of mine is going toward a transit bus, I expect our county to own it. And that's
I get that.
one of the big issues I'm going to have with this program is that, and like I said before, it's not that I need a handout and someone else will buy my bus. We've bought our buses previously, paid for them. Taxpayers in Annapolis County paid for them. And that's the reason behind that. I would not vote for taking taxpayers' money to support something that didn't belong to us.
Councilor Collins, that's not what I'm here to do, is change your mind about that. I'm just here to provide you with the information that you may want, right?
And the buses, we've watched the 40-foot buses go down through our community. And yes, you may have the odd person call you and say, geez, we wish the bus went by our house. But I can tell you, the majority of people that see that bus going up the road, 40-foot bus with 2 people on it, and go back down an hour later with 2 people on it, they're as disgusted about us having a transit as us actually having.
That drives me nuts too, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think that's a feasible way to continue, right? $8 is not going to provide that one-way trip, so.
And again, I feel as a councillor that King's Transit, you guys are pushing the envelope on, we gotta have new buildings, we gotta have certain places for them. That should be our decision. Because we have buildings in our facility, in our vicinity of where our buses are.
So I'm just going to touch on that. Private facilities don't work for public entities. We have a private facility that we lease in Weymouth. It's not working the way it needs to work. King's Transit needs to be self-sufficient, so I can't rely on the whim of somebody that may be upset with us one day and not the next. We need to have our own facilities that we park the buses in to make sure that they have the longevity that we need. If we park an electric bus outside, electric buses and we park it outside, that 10 to 12 year lifespan has gone down by about 25%. The batteries will die quicker, the structure won't last as long, it has to be in a facility. I'm not trying to dictate that, I'm providing recommendations on what this equipment needs. And I will tell you, even the regular buses that we have, for instance, Bridgetown has no covering over it. The issues that we have with those buses in the morning are extreme. Sometimes we have fuel pumps seizing up. We can't get service out in the morning. There's other cases where I had an operator fall and hurt herself. She's been off for 9 months because she had to do a driver's inspection in the exterior of the bus with ice and snow all around the bus, and she was hurt. She is still off. That is costing us. To put a facility up and prevent that sort of thing from happening is good for our people and our assets. Our people first and then our assets. So that's why I'm pushing for that sort of thing. Nor once would I ever tell you, you have to go buy that property and you have to do that. That is your real estate decision, but known that the ISIT program does not cover any real estate fees or costs. If you were to put a building up, they'll pay for the building, but they are not going to pay for the real estate, the realtor, or any other fee that goes into purchasing or leasing that property. we will also get from the feasibility study whether that's a good idea for us or not. So they'll come out and say, you should lease, you should not lease, you should own your own property, you should put a building here, you should put a building there.
Location of.
Yeah, location of, right? And I agree, spread the wealth. If you're going to be a partner, you should have facilities in Annapolis County. And we should have infrastructure in Digby County. Because if we're servicing those areas, it only makes sense to make sure we have the equipment down there in place to service those areas.
Deputy Warden?
Thank you. I'd like to go back to, I'm sorry, I forgot your name again. Dwight. What Dwight said, the changing the name. If this IMSA goes through and Annapolis County becomes part of it, and I believe some of the other municipalities as well, we have a bit of an issue of it being called, referring to it as King's Transit.
We do too.
We do too, we don't like it.
That's good, because I don't like it.
One of the first discussions that Michael and I had was this name just doesn't.
It's not inclusive.
It is not. So it's probably one way or the other, it's going to change.
Good. Thank you. That's the point I'm going to make.
Councilor Sherry?
So what becomes of the old buses if you get this new fleet? And who gets, like if Annapolis County purchased some of it, does some of that money come back to Annapolis County?
So we just sold one of your old vicinity buses. It took me a while to get it done, but I got it done. We made a little bit of money off it, which we did not expect. It is sitting in an account waiting for you. It'll be applied to whatever credit or whatever's there, but that money is yours. You purchase the bus. I'm not going to argue about the ownership. I know there's been some arguments about that in the past. That's not what I'm here for. I'm just there to manage the service. How we own the buses, that will be determined through IMSA. The ISIP is determining that for us, for the ownership of the buses. However, we only plan on replacing what we can at this point to put us in a better spot to get us through the next couple of years until we can get those more funding, or get more funding. In 2026, there should be a full permanent transit funding of $3 billion a year being put in. It looks like it's going to happen. The talks have gone well. Waiting for the federal government to say yay or nay on it. But if that's the case, starting in 2026, when this program ends, there'll be now a $3 billion a year transit funding program that we're able to get into. I will tell you, it's probably going to have the same guidelines as ISIP. So it will be King's Transit Authority or a transit authority agency applies for the funds, gets the funds, maintains, procures, and keeps the assets for their lifespan. So that is the direction that the government's moving in. We don't know what the breakdown percentage of that is going to be. The Rural Transit Solution Fund went to an 80-20 split, which is really good. It's better than the ISIP fund. But the next fund that came out, the ETF fund, 50-50. And that's what I'm hearing we're going to be moving forward with. Right? So if they're going to commit to $3 billion a year, then they're saying the municipal units are going to have to commit to a bit more. So
if the bus is stored there, yes. And that's your discretion.
So we do have policies in place though, which we have to follow first. So it's not up to the county at that point. It would be up to the policies that are in place for getting rid of those assets.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Redden?
So the first question I wrote down was, why are we doing a study when why are we buying assets when we haven't done our holistic study yet? You answered a lot of that. Okay. So our phase 2 purchase is a couple of electric buses and some hybrid buses. Right now on paper.
As I saw it then,
right.
Yes. It had to go in paper and it has to be approved like that. The phase 1 study, once that is complete and we have that assessment, or it'll actually be 2 studies and they're going to go 2 different directions. Mm-hmm. So the holistic is going to come this way and say, oh, it's people. The feasibility study is going to look at money. Right? So then my team has to take those 2 reports, pull them together, and provide 3 or 4 recommendations for the boards and the councils to review to see which way we want to move forward. In saying that, that means we cannot move forward with an $11.496 million project without board approval. Simple. We just can't. Which means once phase 1 is complete, and we bring it back to you folks, we can't do anything else until that point. I can't send out RFPs. I can't sign procurement agreements with buses until we know what you folks want.
So my question there was, we've got phase 2 into, we put a proposal
Yeah.
to the ICIP
Yeah.
for buses, big buses.
For 40-foot, 15 passengers. Yeah.
And if our holistic comes back and says, we need to do all kinds of microtransit and on-demand, how much can we change our phase 2 proposal to the
Quite a bit.
provincial government?
So from what I've talked to them about this because I was concerned about it, and they verified to me that yes, because the study hasn't been complete yet, it is tied together. So no matter what we do now, all they need me to do is get an application in for review. Because if I miss that November 15th deadline, it all goes away. So whatever we have in now, it's not going to matter whether they hold us to it or not at this point. They're not going to, from my understanding. But if we didn't put it in, there's no point in even having this conversation.
The ICIP, if we don't apply on the 15th and get the allocation for the 11.96 million, it will get reallocated to somebody else, another transit agency.
Correct.
Guess who's going to take it? Halifax, and they're going to buy 3 more new buses, right?
So that's but you asked the question, multiple times to multiple people in different ways, and we have flexibility. Again, it's this net PHG reduction. As long as we can still provide that.
So we're really just, the phase 2 application is really just, we want to spend $11.5 million on.
And we had basically, once the province takes it and accepts it, so once they take it on the 15th, or whenever, actually we got a meeting with them tomorrow for staff feedback on it, so we'll find out what it looks like. But regardless of what that feedback is, whether it's scrap it and start over, by the 15th of November, if it's not in, we're not. So there's going to be a lot of sleepless nights, I think, the next couple of weeks. But, we are able to change the direction as long as those studies give us confirmation that is the way we need to move forward, because the spirit of the application and the program itself is to make sure we can modernize and move forward and sustain ourselves. If we do something that's not sustainable, we're eating that, right? So we will follow the direction of the study, and we've been told that the ICIP can be modified after the study comes in to make sure that we incorporate the new recommendations.
Councilor LeBlanc?
Okay, it's my turn. We talked about the buses and when they're sold. Now we're in an ISMA, but before we owned all our buses. So any buses that are going to be sold should automatically the money would come. In our accounts, we had
You talking about your capital fund?
yeah. We have how much?
193.
Yeah.
What is it?
193,000, 196. Somewhere around $190,000 today.
Okay, so where is that money going to go?
That is sitting there and waiting for you guys to figure out what's going to happen.
Okay, so we need to decide to have that money sent to us. Is that basically a letter of, or because it is our money?
So the technicalities of that, I'm not going to comment on because I don't know. I would suggest that you reach out to Municipality County Kings, Municipality Digby. You guys have that discussion with your CAOs or whoever.
I'll go to the next step.
Yeah.
I think the intent at this point is to wait until this pilot project is completed.
Why is that?
Because I think you guys agreed as council to go through to the end of it. So that 2-year project is ongoing, and then whatever the final result of that would be, but the money's there, it's not going to get spent.
But the money can be spent if we decide to use it for repairs or anything on our budget.
Yeah, that's
How they are now.
That's capital.
So it would have to be
Okay, it's in a capital reserve fund. I'm not the municipal finance guru, but my accounting background tells me that those funds are, I'm looking at Doug, they're in a capital reserve fund, so I think the rules around it are very strict to what it's used for.
Yeah. But we do have that amount there that needs to be
Yes, there is.
kept in mind.
Yeah, so there are certain things that we can use it for, but it's really to increase the longevity of the assets that we have.
Yeah.
Right,
So does that include the sale of that bus that you're referring to?
No, that wouldn't include that. That's sitting right in the operational account. That's just,
No, we got paid for them.
Yeah,
we always invoice. I'm not sure the cash is there.
yeah, I think we got everything from City.
That clause in the 193 or 6 is sharing in the capital reserve fund. Whatever the proceeds were on the bus that was disposed of, that's salary.
And we've held everybody's, including MOKs, Digby's, and yours, because we don't really know what's happening yet. So we're holding everything for everybody right now after that sale. But just so you know, it's there. Okay. And I think I sold that one. Yeah, I'm not going to comment.
I can't buy that.
It's either 7 or 3,500. I can't remember. They took the first one for 7, and I think it might have been yours, but I'm not sure. We'll get back to that.
Yeah. So that's why the same way there's changes in the prices of them. So.
And now we're taking that same number too. That new sentence, but
Yeah, because we talked about it before, right? So, yeah. As a matter of fact, I think I let you know as soon as we did get it. So I didn't
yeah,
forget.
because it was both ours and Diggy's and one from
There's one
King's
each.
Yeah, there was one each that went out the
at
door.
the last meeting.
Yeah, it was just that's what one.
At the very end.
And all the other 5 old buses that we couldn't get rid of were donated to the volunteer fire departments around here so they can practice extrications and stuff. So,
Oh,
well, we couldn't sell them. They were sitting there for 5 years.
Yeah,
So,
but-
time to get rid of them.
We wanted them off.
yeah, but it couldn't, there's no better.
It looks like a junkyard back there. So,
Emo and Water Sources came and
Yeah.
oh, they picked them right up. They had no problem with that. So,
Yeah, and we should,
different locations.
Well, if I could take a turn, I've got a number of questions actually.
Sure.
First of all, as I've heard around the table, I really have difficulty with these large buses in Annapolis County. I will confess I didn't pay a lot of attention before the pandemic to the buses and the ridership, but I have since then. And it just blows me away that we have these big buses running around with 2 people in them. I mean, anybody with any common sense can look at those and say something's wrong here. I mean, it's just bizarre.
yeah.
It's absolutely bizarre. And on your little chart you showed us here, we talked about hybrid buses. They're 40-foot buses.
So that was an estimate of cost if we were to replace it at what we have now. So please, like I said before, don't take those numbers as gospel. It's more so to give us an idea of the 11.95 and how much that actually means to us. Because if we were to revise the entire fleet, we're looking upwards of $30 million, right? So,
But in the ISIP application, those are 15 passenger hybrids that we've used.
They're 15? I thought I saw 40.
Mike was just trying to give you an example of electric versus.
For the 40-foot buses,
All
for example.
yeah, all those were 40
Just to
foot
clarify,
because
so
I
that
want to give you a
in
different.
the applications, there were 4 electric buses and 7 hybrid buses, correct?
Yep.
And the hybrid buses, you're telling me, were 15 passenger.
7 15-passenger hybrid electric buses. Yeah.
And so the hybrid buses and the electric buses, how are they distributed? Do all the hybrid buses go to Annapolis and Digby because we don't have the recharging? Or how, you tell me how it was going to be determined?
So, as it stands now, within the core, I can support electrification because the routes are not that long. Like I can, there's routes that are less than 300 kilometers there. There are buses that can go up to 400 kilometers now. That also creates a problem for us. What happens if there's a 40% degrade? Do I get back to the facility? No. So even in the core, I'm seeing some indications that full electrification may not be the answer. Now, I'm not going to come out and say exactly what I'm thinking, because after the conference today, or after the conference last week,
Tackled if he does.
and the infrastructure costs and how they've come up and how they're expected to continue to rise, I don't necessarily believe that electrification full electrification is the way to move forward. That's what I'm willing to say here today.
So are you suggesting that possibly you're going to end up just with all hybrid buses? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm suggesting I'm going to look to the feasibility study and to the holistic outlook study, and I'm going to make my decisions based off that. My personal recommendations would be more than likely moving away from fully electric, but I can't tell you what that looks like. Given the other options, we don't have much.
The next question I have, I've communicated on behalf of the council that we are not going to be part of the original funding.
Yep.
And I've reported to them that what you refer to as the core group in Kings County has decided to go ahead with the full funding, and they're paying more. Essentially, the part that DP and Annapolis were asked to pay. And I take it that DP is basically saying we're not paying now, but we might pay later. Is that fair enough?
They're waiting for phase one.
Okay.
So they're interested in to see what the results are.
So we can, when you do your phase one study, and it's going to have routes, I take it, it's going to have the buses, the right bus for the right route and all that kind of stuff, right? So we can look at that, we Annapolis County can look at that and say, well, I think we're kind of maybe 60% of where we are, that maybe there's something we might want to do.
Yeah.
And I take it there would be an opportunity at that point for Annapolis County to negotiate, I'll call it, with the core group who have paid the money, and Digby, and say, we're prepared to come in, but here's what we need, and we'd like to see it this way, that way, and all that kind of stuff. Is that true? We would have an opportunity to look at phase one, look at this transit study, and say there's something there that maybe we can work with. Am I right?
The door is open.
So
you remember the motion better than I do.
Pardon me?
You remember the KT board motion?
Well, what are you referring to exactly?
The one that states that the three towns in the county are going to go ahead.
Right.
And then once phase one is completed.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember the word.
Yeah. It says
that the option will be given to Annapolis and Digby to reconsider.
Okay.
I think
that's in there. I remember now what you're referring to.
Right.
Right.
So there is a motion at the KTA board that leaves that door open. And I think, conversations I've had with the board, I hope, I will ask that when phase one is completed, we can bring it back to you and show you what they're recommending. It's really, that's why we're here today, really, is to ask that question. And, because I think that would be a much better place to be to make a big decision as this is.
So I think you confirmed, Mike, in one of the other meetings we had at the IMSA board, is that the Kings Transit Authority will own these buses, right? These 11 buses. Right? Annapolis won't own the buses. So if Annapolis, after seeing phase one, wants to come back in, I guess at that point, we wouldn't be owning the buses, but we would be negotiating a financial relationship whereby we would pay some money toward the buses that would be used in Annapolis County. Am I correct? No, I'm wrong.
Okay, so the whole issue with ownership of vehicles and it really boils down to affect your constituents and the customers. If you have two buses break down in Annapolis and we're so strict that we can't bring a bus from somewhere else to help you out, guess who suffers? The customers that need that bus. We need the flexibility as the authority to determine where those buses move to, what they replace if there's mechanical issues, where our drivers drive from, and everything else that has to do with the business processes. Because the minute that we have political influence in how we do things, and I'm not saying anything bad about that, but we go to Smith's Cove and we don't pick up anybody, right? That decision may have cost upwards of tens of thousands of dollars to make sure that we service that area that does not have any passenger pickup. I've heard why that was done in the past. Not my business now, but the repercussions from it are extensive. And that's the type of thing that we need to keep in mind, is that financial decisions where we come and ask for more money, whether it be for wages or buses or whatever, completely in your realm. Operational decisions and where the buses go and where our operators are and how much they get paid, that's an authority decision. Right? And I don't mean to sound disrespectful if that's the way it came off. I hope it didn't. But I'm just saying Kings Transit needs the leniency to run the business as we see fit, with cooperation from the councils in each municipality. So I want to be able to come to you folks and say, what do you need from me? What are your constituents saying? Do they need to be serviced here? Do we need to shorten service here? Do we need a bigger bus? Do we need a smaller bus? And the influence that you have there is talking to the staff members that make those decisions on the operational side. But please don't think that's going to be a guarantee if it's a suggestion that it's going to happen, right? Because my frame of mind is, I need to answer to your constituents. I need to answer to the people that are emailing me every day telling me about service and how poor it is. So I need to make those decisions for them, right? That's what I'm here for. I think that's what I was brought in for, is to try to modernize and change the system and maybe the perspective of what the system is. And having that influence is not going to be fruitful.
If I could, the thrust of my question was that when we were invited to partake in the original grant program, the contribution that Annapolis was asked to make was based on the financial contribution of Annapolis in the 2 years prior to the pandemic. So let's move ahead on the process. We have the phase one. It looks pretty good. We think, oh, this looks pretty good, and we Annapolis think, well, we can talk to these guys. Let's have a chat and see what we come in. Obviously it would involve a financial relationship between Annapolis and Kings Transit. Are the negotiations wide open, or are we stuck with this proposal that we were given with respect to the 2 years prior to the pandemic?
I'm hoping by that point in time, the IMSA draft will be close enough.
Well, that doesn't answer my question. Is there an answer? If there's no answer...
Well, the answer would be the financial contribution scenario should be set on the IMSA. If we're going to come up with a new baseline, if we don't like the past year's contribution as far as front dollars go, is it ridership, is it citizenship, is it tax base? There's all kinds of things I guess I have in the back of my head that comes on the IMSA. So once we have a baseline for that, because that's what we just did with the court partners. We used their 1999 census data.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay.
The timing may not work. The phase one might be done, and we might be trying to work out a relationship if we want to, and the IMSA may not be finished.
Great point. Might not. But I think I don't think we're hung up.
Okay.
On the current.
But there would have to be a financial negotiation, no matter how you cut it. If we want to partake, we're having to negotiate something different than what we have now, right?
Correct. And whether that's a charge per kilometer or whatever it is, because it boils down, your routes are the longest in our system and put the most amount of time and hours in these buses. So that's why you see higher than normal maintenance costs. And we change tires on those buses once a month because they're required. URB will come to us, inspect our bus and say, no, it's a millimeter too short, change it. That $3,800 mirror you bought, half an inch too short, take it off, put another one on. This is where the costs are coming from. We're not governed just by KTA or our board. We're governed by 3 or 4 different organizations that are very prohibitive to our business. So.
I'm going to take one more question, and then I'll stop. You mentioned the on-demand service. Okay, I'm curious about that. I think the PCTS program we have, I think, works very well.
Yep.
And this might be a crazy thought, but, they've got these nice little buses. Some are even smaller than 15 passengers. Why don't we just have a TCTS in Annapolis County where people ring up and they get somebody to pick them up and take them where they want to go, and we've got small buses. We might even be saving greenhouse gases by having these small buses going around instead of these big, huge mammoths going around. Has anybody looked into the reality of that actually servicing our people better at a cheaper cost? Has anybody looked into that?
So as of now, I'm in talks with software companies now on how to provide microtransit, right? Because it's getting more and more complicated as we go, because it's tracking people that are vulnerable with disabilities, how we service them as well. Like, can that 3-passenger Santa Fe or cruise pick that person up, or do we need to send a fully accessible van to pick this person up? Like, there's a lot more to it, and the liability is fairly high with these because you're transporting vulnerable people a lot of the time. It's expensive to kick it into gear. Like I said, to support our vehicles, we're looking at $700,000 just for the software and the equipment to provide that. And that will, help adjust our routes. It will formulate areas that we should be servicing. Count all of our passengers, track our passengers, track where they get on, where they get off. All the good stuff that we really need to do to make sure that we're providing the best service to them. Without that, it's pen and paper, it's answering a phone, it's Excel, and that's how you track things. It's not the data that we're going to need to go to the federal government or provincial government and ask for anything more. So,
but I guess to answer your question directly, you could no. And we haven't looked at whether that service would.
But it will be looked at. It's part of the ISIT.
Through phase one, that's part of what the.
Other questions? Deputy report? I'll go to Councillor Bardo. I don't think he's asked any yet.
A little confusing on something. Something's clear as well, but
that's why we're here.
On our usage, we're paying for usage. One formula. We buy our buses.
Yep.
That's got to be into the formula somehow. You requested we be on board for electrification of buses. We said not this time. How does that all filter down? And if we wanted to do something on our own, say we go to Dallas County and then coordinate with King's Transit or whatever. There's all kinds of formulas that could be in place. But if we did do that, you major allocations based on our ridership. So if we do that, is that going to curtail? You have to remit some back, or how does that work?
So I jumped ahead of the gun a little bit. I started asking these questions, and it does not affect the $11.946 million that we'll be receiving. It was from 2018 off King's Transit data. Annapolis County didn't own a transit company at that point in time. Wouldn't even have been eligible for the fund because that's when the ridership was taken from. So King's Transit took it upon themselves to apply for this application because that is our role as staff, is to make sure that we're applying for these things for you folks and making sure we're getting new vehicles in. So that's kind of where we are. It's not going to affect the funding that we receive from the province.
So we have formula in place where we pay for buying buses, plus we're paying King's Transit. And for any company to make their ends meet, their balance sheets.
Yeah.
So we're not contributing to the electrification aspect of it. Does that mean that you're picking up on the other end on the fee for service? So we're paying it anyway? How does that work?
So, no.
Okay, the fee for service are direct costs. So when you get that reconciliation at the end of a year, it's the wages for the drivers that are in Annapolis County. It's the buses that are here. It's the fuel that gets pumped at that location. It's the maintenance on those buses. It's very detailed, itemized down the page. And the repairs are done, at the minus location. They're billed out at a whopping $45 an hour for the diesel mechanics, all in. So it's a very, very inexpensive mechanic rate. And you pay for the cost of the parts, so there's no markup on the parts. So if you put a new tire on, it's $500. I'm just picking a number. You get billed $500. There's no admin charges. There's no top up. There's nothing.
Anyone else that comes in and uses our garage is $98 an hour for our mechanics. So because you're a service partner, or what we would call a service partner at this time, there should be a reduction in the rate for that because we're maintaining those buses, and we want to maintain them to the standards of King's Transit because it's our name on the side of the bus that's going to get dinged for anything. It's our insurance that gets dinged for stuff. It's not Lamb County, so we have to make sure that those buses and everything are up to snuff with us. It's also our motor carrier license, so we lose that, we can't operate at all.
So I'm not sure of the incentive to join into the new fleet if we're not going to pay any different.
Well, your difference would be obviously fuel consumption. Your difference would be maintenance, because it's a newer fleet. You have to remember some of these buses are 10 or 12 years old with 2 million kilometers on them. So, that's where you're going to see any savings. Would just be on those types of things. Your wages aren't going to change because you're going to be the same operator driving the bus. I say that. Obviously, depending on what the routing is and service levels are, the wage per component could go up, actually. And so could the fuel, but on a kilometer for kilometer basis, service today, things like that will go down.
You buy a new diesel bus, you're spending 10 grand, 12 grand a year on maintenance. Right now, we're spending upwards of $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in maintenance on some of these buses, with engine jobs, transmission jobs, stuff that doesn't need to be done after 1 million kilometers, but we're at 1.2, 1.3, 1.8. Like, these things start to fall apart after a while, right?
You finished, Councilor Barber?
For now.
I saw another hand. Deputy Warden.
Thank you. There's been a kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Slag against buses. So how do you guys propose to get more of the public using our bus system? Because that's kind of important to us here. I mean, we don't want to see the new transit system invest into new buses and still even microbuses going down with 1 and 2 people on it. We need more ridership, period.
Yeah.
And we need more people using those buses. So how do you guys propose to?
I see Dwight staring at me out of the corner of my eye here, so I guess I'll take this one.
Both do this one. Yeah, go ahead.
Ridership is difficult for everybody right now. Even the major agencies like TransLink in BC just celebrated going over 80% of the ridership before the pandemic. We're at about 64% of ridership. I will put that up to closing down the system. That really affected ridership. It told the passengers we are not an essential service and they can do without us. So guess what they did? They did without us. Right? They went, they found other ways to get around, they did their thing, and then we kicked back service a couple months later and we can't get ridership back. So, not spending a bunch of money right now on ridership initiatives because we're about to spend a bunch of money. So I'm holding off on that. Feasibility study, the transit study, I tell you, that's going to give some information. It's not going to give a whole lot about how to gain our ridership back. That's the one thing it's not going to give us. I think this rolls into the rebranding effort, to be blunt. As you can see, staff have already been thinking about some things. I know we've probably heard this around the table a couple of times, but Valley Transit, Valley Regional Transit Authority, High Tide Transit, Basin Transit Authority, Annapolis Regional Transit Authority, like a whole bunch of stuff that are just generic to encompass where we live and where we operate, right? I think that's one of the largest things. Service, the next largest thing. So one, tell them we're new, show them we're new. Improve service levels. Every 2 hours for a bus, not gonna work. 45 minutes for a bus, will probably work a little bit better. Within high density areas, half an hour for a bus, right? So the minute we start increasing service, we start increasing the fleet, because we got it. That means more addition, more money, right? We need to provide the service that people want. So we're looking with Valley Ren right now to find out all the major players in our area. So Michelin and all these other folks that really employ a lot of people and see what they need from us to transport their people there. So does Michelin need a 24-hour service that loops around there? Do they need a service that only runs between 7 a.m. and 12 a.m.? Like we don't know because we haven't had the chance to talk to them yet. So I think the real thing that we need to do is engagement, hold town halls, talk to people, show them what show them that we're changing, show them what we're going to bring to the table, and make some concrete promises that we can hold up. None of this, we're going to do this and then fail, because that's going to show them that we're not there yet. So these we're going to under-promise and over-deliver on everything we do from this point forward to make sure that these folks that ride our bus know that we are a reliable, safe service. Okay? We started a busing on the lookout program. Nova Scotia, one of the highest child human trafficking organizations in Canada. We work with a company in the States to provide all our operators with busing on the lookout training so they can identify issues of human trafficking and how to notify proper authorities. We've already stopped 3 occasions where this may have been occurring. This is the value that our system is going to bring back to our communities, right? And we need to advertise that and tell them and publicize, not brag, but tell them what we're doing to help support their communities and their family. That's how I plan on getting ridership back.
Just little things like since I've been around. Yeah. The service runs from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. So we've reached out to some chambers of commerce, Valley Ren, places like that to try to understand, should it be 7 days? Should it be 5 days? Should it be 24 hours? We have to look at all of those things to be able to get the ridership up. But the biggest thing, it's just reputation. King's Transit, we've asked, its reputation right now is poor. Service, reliability, we just need to get that back to a standard that is acceptable and really promote. And right from the branding we talked about already, from the name, software. It's taken me forever to try to figure the paper schedule out, to be brutally honest, because you have to be a statistician on this to be able to go through, figure out when the next bus is coming.
Well, that's not accessible, and that's part of it. By 2030, we have to be fully accessible. So what does that mean? Redoing our schedules, putting in braille signs, putting in rumble strips on the ground by the sidewalks where you wait for the buses, so the visually impaired know this is where you wait for the bus. External and internal announcements in the buses. Guys, this costs a lot of money to become fully accessible. We're talking millions here, right? The program that's going to allow us to do that is $700,000, but that's only the very beginning of it, and that's the problem.
And the same with bus stops, looking at how those are set up, where they are, shelters, not sheltered, there's all those things. And, we have COGS in the middle of that program as we speak, trying to look at, where those stops are and whether we should, shelters and what the options are. There's some funding Michael's already applied for. Just so you know, there may be enough requests coming here at some point. But so trying to make it user friendly is really what we know we have to, because we know it's important today.
Anything else, Council? Seeing none, I want to really thank you both for coming.
Absolutely.
I think it's very important that you two develop a direct relationship with the council. There's going to be, as I said, a new warden at the IMSA after next meeting, and the representative we have on the IMSA board, speaking for myself, can't do a very good job of really the detail that's required to communicate what you have to the council. So I'm hoping that you'll have a regular interaction. You'll come here and have a regular interaction with the council rather than relying on the member of the IMSA to be the conduit. So thank you so much for coming. Very valuable information. Appreciate it.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. You can always reach out to us if you have any information too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda is the adjournment. Anything else we need to do before we break? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion moved by the deputy, seconded by Councilor Ray. Call for the vote. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion's